guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be the worst books that I read in 2020, and I filmed this back to back with my last video, so I'm not even going to pretend otherwise with an outfit change. This is what you get. Again, I'm going to preface this video with a disclaimer that obviously my opinion is my opinion, and if you love any of these books, if they're your absolute favorite books in the entire world, I totally understand. They were just personally not for me. So without further ado, the very first book that I read and did not like in 2020 was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This video is going to be a lot shorter than the last one because I obviously am not going to sit here raving to you about how much I loved all of these books, and I also don't want to sit here and bash all of them for half an hour. So I didn't like The Cruel Prince because, well, I talked about this in my anti-TBR tag. I didn't click with any of the characters, I didn't click with the plot line, I didn't click with the world or the writing. I don't know, I kind of pushed myself through it. I think that I kind of generously gave it 3 stars, but that's when I was like trying to give everything a chance. Probably if I thought about it again, I would bump it down a star at the very least. But yeah, the whole Fae world that she built was not for me, so yeah. Oh, I guess I should tell you guys what it's about. So, The Cruel Prince, I don't even remember. Oh, Jude. I think Jude is the girl's name. She is a human girl, and her mom escaped from the Fae lands and escaped from like a Fae prince or something, I guess. And for some reason or whatever, he comes into the human world and kidnaps Jude and her sisters and takes them back to the Fae lands with him, I think after their mother dies or something along those lines. I'm not sure, honestly. I really don't remember this book that well. So, the Fae are all cruel, and Jude and her sisters are trying to learn to live in this world, and they're going to school and they're getting bullied and whatnot, and Jude decides that she has an advantage over them because they can't lie, and she can, and she decides to use that to her advantage in scheming and politicking and stuff. I don't know. There's like a romance, but it seemed like it was kind of toxic to me in the first book, so I didn't really feel all that interested or invested in moving on to the second one. That was a little bit more ranty than I intended, so sorry. The second book on this list is Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this is actually sitting in my unhaul pile right now. I got this in I think an owl crate, maybe, or something. And I tried it and I did not like it. Shay Earnshaw's writing does not really click with me, I guess. It's a little bit too pretty, a little bit too prosy. I don't know. I don't remember any of the character names, I'm just going to tell you that right now. But the main character is a witch from a long line of witches, although I don't actually know if they call themselves that, tasked with protecting a forest near their house, which is in the middle of nowhere as far as I know. And it's like a magical forest, I guess, and she's like the only person that can walk into it without getting lost or eaten or something. I don't know. And one day when she's in the woods, she sees a boy and she thinks he's dead, but he's not dead, and then she nurses him to health, and it turns out that he's like run away from this juvenile boys camp thing on the other side of the lake. And they're trying to figure out why he went missing, and there's a whole mystery, and I guess the plot twist, like, way early on in the book, it was not hidden very well, in my opinion, and I think that kind of ruined my enjoyment of the entire rest of it. I don't particularly like how it ended. It felt like a cop-out, and I didn't really love it. I love the book cover. It's beautiful. But I don't really see myself ever wanting to read it again, so I have no need to keep it, so it is in my unhaul pile. This next one makes me a little bit sad because I love the other books that I've read by her, but this is The Kingmaker by Kennedy Ryan. I had to force myself through this book. And this is, I read, oh man, I don't even remember. She has like a basketball romance series, and I really loved the first book. I was put through the ringer as far as emotions go in the first book. I will put a cover over here because I really don't remember what the name of it was. But the second book, I think I actually might have DNF'd that. The second book in that series was like, there was cheating, and it was unapologetic cheating, and that's just not something that gets me in a romance novel. I just don't like it. So yeah, I DNF'd the second book in that series, but I was so hopeful for her other writing because I loved that first one so much. And so when I read The Kingmaker, I thought I was going to love it. It was so politics heavy, and I get having politics in books. I'm not trying to shy away from that. But every page was just shoving it down your throat that it took a forefront to the romance, in my opinion, and that is not what I was reading it for. I was reading it for the love story. I don't really remember anything about what it's about. I know that the main, like, woman lead was, like, of Native American descent, and she was very heavily involved in, like, protests of pipelines being built, whereas the male main lead, he comes from, like, an oil tycoon family that he has disowned, kind of. He's just gotten away from them, and he hates what his family does and what they stand for, and he has actually gone into environmental science and research or something. Yeah, I don't know. It was not only politics heavy, but it was heavy on the miscommunication trope, and it was heavy on the this gets me in books every single time, where if, like, somebody's family member is responsible for something and you can't forgive, like, the person whose family member it was, even though they had absolutely nothing to do with it, it drives me insane. So, I mean, I don't know if this is spoilery or not. I apologize if it is, but, like, his father obviously built the pipelines that she was protesting, and she hates his guts for it, even though he's pretty much disowned his father, and he tells her that, and she is aware of that, but she can't get over the fact that, I don't know, it was not good. And it left off on a cliffhanger, which I obviously don't like either. And yeah, it left off on a cliffhanger, and I didn't even pick up the second book, which is on Kindle Unlimited, so I could have gotten it for free, and I did not care to, if that tells you anything. So, I have hope still for Kennedy Ryan. I have other series that I've looked at by her that really interest me. I haven't given up on her yet, but this one was not for me. This next one saddens me because I liked all of the other books in the series, but that is Escaping from Houdini by Kerri Maniscalco. I gave this 2 stars because it seemed like a complete and total departure from everything that the characters had been building towards for the last 2 books. This is the 3rd book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. You follow Audrey Rose and Thomas, and they are students of, I don't want to call it mortuary sciences, but, like, they're learning from her uncle how to perform autopsies and solve cases and things like that. Obviously, this is a very frowned upon job for a woman in the 1800s from London, from a high society family, and she deals with it anyway. She doesn't really care what people think of her. Thomas totally supports that. They have a whole romance story that is adorable. And in the 1st book, they solve the Jack the Ripper murders. In the 2nd book, they go to Romania and deal with Dracula. And then in the 3rd book, you deal with, like, murders on board a ship that has a nightly magic show in which Harry Houdini is a member of, and people are dying, and it's a whole thing, and oh, I didn't like it. Audrey Rose did, like, a complete 180 on her character development from the last 2 books. Thomas was, like, not the Thomas that I had loved in the first 2 books. I did not like it. I pushed myself through it, but I gave it 2 stars. I was not a fan. However, Capturing the Devil, which is the 4th book in the series and deals with, like, the H.H. Holmes murders during the Chicago World Fair, was so good. The first half of it was, like, I kind of felt the same way about Escaping from Houdini, but, like, the second half on, the way that it wrapped up, I loved it so much. The next book on my list is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This was probably not as awful as, like, I feel that it is, but this book deals with a girl whose name that I cannot recall off the top of my head, but her sister died as, like, not really a show host, but she was a member of, like, a Discovery Channel kind of TV show, which they were going to, I want to say, like, the Bermuda Triangle to research the existence of mermaids, and everybody on that ship was murdered, and there was some film that was released that made it seem like they were killed by murderous mermaids, I guess, and everybody thought that the film was a hoax, and so a few years later, the same TV show decides to put together another mission to investigate the deaths of the first people, and the sister, who is alive, decides to go to try and find out what happened. I had some issues with this book. Nothing, like, terrible, and probably nothing that would bother people in normal everyday lives, but I am a scientist, and when you can't actually put any of the research in to the science that you're using in your book to try and figure out what it does, it really, really bothers me. There was some instrumentation that some of these supposedly world-renowned scientists were using, and the things that they were saying it does is just not how it works. And most of the time, I can suspend my belief for that kind of stuff, but it was just so blatant and so glaringly wrong that it really irritated me and probably put a damper on the entire rest of the book for me. On top of the fact that there were scenes where, like, characters were actually so I get it's a horror novel, guys. I just didn't think that it had to have such cheesy horror movie moments, such as when a person is doing something exceedingly dangerous and everybody's like, oh my god, you're gonna die, no, turn around. And they're like, oh, but I'm so close, I'm almost there. And everybody's like, no, but really, you're gonna die, turn around. They did not turn around. They died. It just annoyed me. I think I gave it like 2.5 stars. I really didn't like it. I listened to the whole thing on audiobook. I thought I was going to enjoy it a lot more, and I'm really sad that I didn't. Alright, so I'm super disappointed to have to put this next one on my list, but I was so disappointed by Battleground by Jim Butcher. This is, I don't even know what number we're on anymore. This is like his newest installment in the Dresden Files series. He released 2 books this year in the Dresden Files, Peace Talks and Battleground. They were released about 2 months apart, I think, and I had such high hopes for Battleground because Peace Talks was so good. I loved it. It was everything that I wanted in a book that I think we've been waiting like 3 years at least for it. And then Battleground happened, and while I read it pretty quickly, it was pretty easy to read pretty quickly because it was just one gigantic battle scene. Obviously, I mean, it's called Battleground. I don't know what else I was expecting from that. Peace Talks and Battleground were originally supposed to be one big novel, and I guess they told him he needed to turn them into 2, and then he said that the only way he was going to do that is if he could release them back to back. I think they should have stayed as one novel, and I think that he should have cut out so much stuff because there was just so much that was unnecessary in Battleground, and probably in Peace Talks too. I just liked it so much more that it's not as like obvious to me, but in Battleground it was not good. I gave it 3 stars. It's probably closer to 2.5 for me. I just felt most of it was unnecessary. I felt like certain things that happened, while I don't say that they were unnecessary, I felt that the way that they happened was not doing justice to their characters, and I kind of wish that it hadn't happened, and if you've read Battleground, you'll know what I'm talking about, but yeah, it didn't do it for me. I'm gonna keep reading the series, obviously, but Battleground did not have any of the amazingness that I had expected from the newest Dresden Files book. This next book on my list might ruffle some feathers because I know that a lot of people in the horror reading community really liked it, and that is A Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. So this book follows like not a suburban, it's not in the suburbs, but like a southern housewife who joins a book club with a bunch of other housewives. They end up reading like gory murder mysteries and things like that in this book club to try and like get away from the drudgery of their regular life. And at some point, their book club, I guess, kind of is infiltrated by a vampire, and they find this out and they want to kill him. That's the summary on the back. I hated it. I tried it in ebook and I tried it in audiobook, and the only reason I finished it is because I listened to the audiobook on 2 times speed, and then I wasn't paying attention to half of it. So my issues with this book are many, and I won't say that it's not my fault at all, because it probably was my fault for not looking up trigger warnings for this ahead of time. But I think that my issue with it is more with the marketing than the book itself. While I do think that parts of the book were 100% unnecessary, it is a horror, and its purpose is to make you uncomfortable. And wow, did it make me uncomfortable. Especially listening to it on audiobook. So as far as trigger warnings go, look up the trigger warnings yourself, I beg you, because it is absolutely 100% necessary. And every time I had seen this book marketed, it was like, oh, Steel Magnolias meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I was like, that sounds great, it sounds campy, it sounds fun, it sounds hilarious, and that's like what everybody was talking about it as. That is not what it was, I promise you. I did not like it at all. Not a single bit. So yeah, just look up trigger warnings, guys, if you're gonna try and read this book, please. My next book on this list doesn't really, I don't know. It's mostly on my worst books of 2020 just because I had a lot of good reads in 2020 and this just fell towards the bottom of all of them. And that's Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. The premise of this is so cool. It follows a woman who is like a private detective, and she has been hired to go to a magic school and investigate a death there because the police have been there and ruled it as, I think they ruled it as like a suicide or an accident or something, and they don't believe that's what actually happened. So this magic school comes to her because her sister is actually a teacher there. Her sister has magic and she does not, which is why she knows of this world and is, while not comfortable with it, I guess she's accepting of it. So she goes to this magic school and she kind of gets embroiled in the social life there and the scene there while she's investigating the death of this teacher. The concept was really cool. I just don't think that it was fleshed out the way that I wanted it to be fleshed out. I was kind of expecting like a magician's type world, but it was really like a high school for magical teenagers. Kind of like Harry Potter, but like not really Harry Potter. It was different. It wasn't bad in any way, and I can definitely see why a lot of people like it. I just don't think that the writing was for me. I don't think that the ending was for me. I had suspicions of the way that it ended from the very beginning, and I don't like having been able to do that. So yeah, I gave this 3 stars, which is not bad in any way, but it did kind of fall towards the bottom of my reads for this year. I'm gonna combine the next 2 into like one category, and that is Full Moon and Grave Peril, also by Jim Butcher from the Dresden Files. And this, I'm not gonna say that it surprises me. I've read the entire Dresden Files before. Like I said, this has been a really good reading year, so these are just books that fell towards the bottom of the list for me. And this year I started rereading the Dresden Files in preparation for Peace Talks to come out. I only made it as far as Grave Peril, so that failed. But Full Moon and Grave Peril are not great examples of the Dresden Files series as a whole. It's books 2 and 3, and one of them involves vampires, one of them involves ghosts, and Harry Dresden gets embroiled in some deep shit that he always gets embroiled in. It's just what he does, it's how he goes about life. And the concept, while kind of cool, I think that it's kind of widely known that these are 2 of the worst books in the entire Dresden Files series, and I, upon rereading, kind of have to agree. They do get better. I know that they get better because I remember them getting better, but Full Moon and Grave Peril, they did not do it for me when I reread them this year. I loved them as a teenager. I loved them so much. But now reading them again as an adult, I just struggled so hard trying to get through them. The last book on this list is, again, falling into the trap of just being at the bottom of a list of pretty good books. So this was not a bad book in any way. It just really wasn't for me, and that's A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. It actually makes me super sad to put this on here because Alyssa Cole gets so much love on BookTube, and I loved the concept of like a brainy scientist and a prince who has been betrothed to her since their childhood, but she doesn't remember who he is, and he knows exactly who she is, and he like lies to her and pretends to be non-royal and work in the same restaurant as her just to get to know her. But that went too far, in my opinion. So the reason I ended up not liking this is I have made no secret that I don't like the miscommunication trope, especially in romance novels, because they should be based on trust, and there's so much lying going on that it ruins the story for me. And this was true in A Princess in Theory because he built this entire relationship with her. They got together, they slept together, and he never told her who he was, and that just feels so icky to me, and I did not like it, and she, in my opinion, forgave him way too fast for that. So yeah, it hit the wrong note for me. I do want to continue on with the series. I think that the next few books in the series might work out for me a little bit better just because I don't like that trope at all. It automatically makes me not like a book. So yeah. Alright, so that is it for my worst books of 2020. Let me know in the comments if you guys have read any of these, if you didn't like them as well. Again, I'm sorry if any of these are your favorite book. Absolutely no shade, but they just did not work for me for whatever reason. And so that is it for me today, guys. I will see you in my next video. Bye!